The room fell silent when Lady Margaret Whitmore pointed a trembling finger at her niece and laughed. "Look at you, Clara. Do you honestly believe any gentleman in America would choose a girl like you?" Clara stood beside the grand fireplace, her hands folded tightly in front of her, trying not to let the tears in her eyes fall. She had heard cruel words from her aunt before, but that evening, something inside her finally broke. What Clara did not know was that someone had just arrived at the estate, someone who had crossed hundreds of miles for one reason. He had not come to mock her, pity her, or inspect her like a piece of property. He had come to ask for her hand. If you believe kindness, second chances, and true love can change a person's life, take a moment to like this story, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories. Clara Whitmore had grown up in a beautiful old estate outside Charleston, South Carolina, but beauty had never made her life easy. Her parents had died when she was 17, leaving her under the care of her mother's older sister, Margaret. To the outside world, Margaret appeared generous. She hosted elegant dinners, donated to charities, and spoke constantly about family honor. But behind closed doors, she treated Clara like an unwanted burden. Clara was 26, far older than the young women Margaret believed should still be unmarried. She was quiet, thoughtful, and happiest when she was reading or helping the servants in the kitchen. She had never learned how to flirt at parties, never cared about expensive jewelry, and had no desire to chase wealthy men. Her greatest joy was teaching local children to read at a small community school. Margaret considered all of this embarrassing. Every time another young woman became engaged, Margaret reminded Clara that time was running out. She told her that gentlemen wanted beauty, confidence, and connections. Clara had none of the qualities Margaret valued. What made matters worse was that Clara refused to pretend to be someone she was not. That evening, Margaret had invited several wealthy families to dinner. Clara wore a simple emerald green dress that had belonged to her mother. It was elegant but modest, and Clara had pinned her mother's small silver brooch at the collar. Margaret looked her up and down with disapproval. "You should have worn something brighter," she said. "No gentleman will notice you dressed like a schoolteacher." Clara quietly replied that she was comfortable with what she wore. That answer angered Margaret. After dinner, while several guests remained in the drawing room, Margaret decided to humiliate her niece in front of everyone. She laughed and announced that Clara was becoming desperate because she still had no suitors. A few guests looked uncomfortable. Clara lowered her eyes. Then Margaret delivered the words that would change everything. "No gentleman will choose you." The sentence seemed to echo through the enormous room. Clara felt her chest tighten. She wanted to run upstairs, but she refused to give her aunt the satisfaction of seeing her cry. So she simply turned and walked toward the veranda. Outside, warm Carolina air touched her face. She gripped the railing and finally allowed a tear to fall. She wondered if Margaret was right. Maybe she really was too ordinary. Maybe nobody would ever see beyond her plain dresses, quiet nature, and gentle heart. Then the sound of horses interrupted her thoughts. A carriage had stopped at the front entrance. The household servants hurried toward the doors. Margaret frowned, clearly irritated by the unexpected visitor. A tall man stepped from the carriage wearing a dark blue coat. He looked exhausted, as though he had traveled through the night. His boots were dusty, and his expression was unusually serious. His name was Alexander Beaumont. He was not simply a wealthy gentleman. He was the Duke of Beaumont, one of the most respected landowners in the country, with estates in Virginia and business interests throughout the eastern United States. The room instantly changed when he entered. Margaret rushed forward, smiling as though she had forgotten Clara existed. "Your Grace, what an unexpected honor." Alexander barely acknowledged her greeting. His eyes moved across the room. Then they found Clara standing near the veranda. For several seconds, neither spoke. Clara recognized him immediately. They had met once before, months earlier, although she doubted he remembered. At the time, Alexander had visited the local school where Clara taught. A little boy had been struggling to read, and Clara had stayed after sunset helping him sound out every word. Alexander had watched from the doorway. He had never forgotten her. Margaret proudly explained that Clara was her niece, but she spoke about her as though introducing an embarrassing servant. Alexander listened quietly. Then he asked Clara if he could speak with her privately. Margaret's smile disappeared. A few minutes later, Alexander and Clara stood on the veranda where the night breeze moved gently through the trees. Clara apologized for her aunt's behavior. Alexander shook his head. "You have nothing to apologize for." Clara looked confused. He told her that he had remembered their earlier meeting. He remembered how Clara had treated that frightened little boy with patience when everyone else had already given up on him. Then Alexander admitted something unexpected. He had been searching for a woman who possessed exactly that kind of heart. Not someone impressed by his title. Not someone interested in his money. Not someone who would marry him because of his position. He wanted someone kind. Someone honest. Someone who could see the value in people who had nothing to offer her. Clara thought he was simply being polite. Then Alexander reached inside his coat. He removed a small velvet box. Clara's breath caught. He opened it. Inside was a delicate sapphire ring. "I came here tonight because I could not wait another day," he said. "Clara, I know this may seem sudden, but I have admired you for months. I would like to marry you, if you can find it in your heart to choose me." Clara stared at him in disbelief. Behind the glass doors, Margaret was watching. Her face had gone completely pale. The same woman who had declared that no gentleman would choose Clara was now watching the most powerful gentleman in the room asking Clara to become his wife. But Clara did not immediately say yes. She asked Alexander why he would choose someone like her. His answer brought tears to her eyes. "Because you are the first person I have met in years who does not measure people by what they own." Clara looked down at the ring. For the first time in her life, someone had seen her, not as an orphan, not as an unwanted niece, not as a woman past the age Margaret considered desirable, but as a person worthy of love. Still, Clara was afraid. She told Alexander that she had nothing to offer him compared with the women he could marry. He smiled gently. "You have something money cannot buy." "What?" "A heart that remained kind after people gave you every reason to become bitter." Clara finally began to cry. Not from sadness. From relief. She accepted his proposal. The following morning, Margaret attempted to convince Clara that the Duke was making a mistake. She warned her that powerful men did not marry ordinary women without hidden motives. But Clara had spent years believing every cruel thing her aunt said. She was done. For once, she trusted her own heart. Weeks later, Clara married Alexander in a small ceremony overlooking the gardens of his Virginia estate. She wore her mother's emerald dress, the same one Margaret had mocked. This time, no one laughed. Alexander stood beside her with tears in his eyes. After the wedding, Clara did something nobody expected. She asked Alexander to help her expand the little school where she had taught children. He agreed immediately. Within a year, the school had become a beautiful community academy serving children who could never afford expensive education. Clara became its director. And Margaret? She eventually came to visit. She looked older and quieter. The pride she once carried had disappeared. She apologized to Clara. Clara did not forget the cruelty, but she chose forgiveness. Not because Margaret deserved to be forgiven easily, but because Clara refused to spend the rest of her life carrying the pain her aunt had placed on her shoulders. Years later, whenever someone asked Clara how she had managed to become a duchess, she would smile. She never said that a duke had rescued her. Because he hadn't. Alexander had simply recognized the woman she already was. And Clara had finally learned the most important lesson of her life. Sometimes the people who tell you that you are unworthy are only revealing how little they understand your worth. The woman Margaret claimed no gentleman would choose became the woman a duke crossed the country to marry. But the greatest part of her story was not the title, the estate, or the sapphire ring. It was the moment Clara stopped asking whether she was good enough for someone else, and started believing that she was worthy of happiness all on her own. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who needs a little hope, and subscribe for more stories about love, kindness, and second chances. And before you go, comment, "Kindness always wins," if you believe a person's true worth is found in their heart, not in their wealth, beauty, or social status. Because sometimes, the person everyone overlooks is exactly the person someone has been searching for all along.